So today I want to go over a Druid build that is focused on doing absolutely massive overpowers that will allow you to hit millions of damage per overpower. And this build is going to be a bit different than a lot of the other normal Pulverize builds you're going to be seeing, but with that, this build is also going to be using 3 different uniques. We're going to be using Vasily's Prayer, which your Earth skills are now also Werebear skills and fortify you some. The main reason we want to use this is so Earth skills are now also Werebear skills, meaning you get a lot more scaling. Then we're going to be using Insatiable Fury. Werebear is now your true form, and also you get +3 ranks to Werebear skills. This chest piece also has pretty good stats now. It has a very high overpower roll, a physical damage roll, so pretty high damage. It has a massive armor while in Werebear and a damage reduction while fortified, so it gives you some really big damage and really big damage reduction. And then something that I really haven't seen a lot of other builds using is a new necklace, which is the Banished Lord's Talisman. Now the special of this is after you spend 300 of your primary resource, your next core skill is a guaranteed overpower, but the more important part of this is your critical strikes that also overpower deal up to 120% multiplicative increased damage. So it's just an absurdly high damage increase, and with this build we have a ton of guaranteed overpower and we have a bunch of guaranteed crits. And an overpower plus a crit is the orange damage numbers you'll sometimes see, and that's what's going to allow this build to deal millions of damage in singular hits. And then next up we have our skill tree, starting with Earth Spike. We do actually have to use our generator more commonly in single target fights. Then upgrade 1, it just has a chance to stun. Then we're going down 5 into Pulverize, which is our main damaging ability. Upgrade 1, when you remain healthy for 12 seconds, your next Pulverize is an overpower. That's one of our overpowers. Then upgrade 2, when we pulverize something, it deals 20% less damage for 4 seconds, making an already very tanky build even more tanky. Then we're going down, we're taking Earthern Bulwark, which is just going to be a barrier. And because this is both an Earth and Werebear skill, we have a bunch of additional points because of our other effects. This is actually going to give us a decent barrier. Upgrade 1 makes you unstoppable. Upgrade 2 makes the barrier explode to deal some additional damage. Then we're going down taking Debilitating Roar, which is a big AoE damage reduction. Upgrade 1 fortifies you, and upgrade 2 slows all enemies around us. Now the slow is actually going to be very good for generating more of our spirit because of another one of our effects. Then we're going down and taking Trample. This is going to be able to deal a little bit of damage. It's going to be good for movement. It's going to give us unstoppable. Upgrade 1 means it deals more damage the less targets it hits. Upgrade 2, which is one of the main reasons we're taking it, is we get 40 spirit when we use it, which is quite a lot of spirit. That's a big chunk of our bar. Then we're going down and taking Grisly Rage, which is just going to give us massively increased damage and damage reduction. Upgrade 1 makes us unstoppable for 6 seconds. Upgrade 2 fortifies us per second. And then we're going down taking the Earthern Might Capstone, which is a lucky hit. Damaging enemies with an Earth skill, which all of our skills are, has a 5% chance to restore all spirit and make all of your attacks guaranteed crits for 5 seconds. This is how we get a ton of guaranteed critical overpowers. And the chance for this to proc is increased from crits or when hitting CC'd enemies, and this can proc itself. So you can back-to-back proc this, just putting out some ridiculous burst damage. And then next up we have our passives. 1 into Heart of the Wild, so we can get 3 into Wild Impulses. Your core skills cost more but do more damage. 3 into Predatory Instinct, critical strike increase against close enemies. 3 into Iron Fur, 9% damage reduction while in Werebear, so just 9% damage reduction. Then 3 into Interstitial Fortitude, increases all of your resistances by 50%. Then 3 into Vigilance, damage reduction after using a defensive. This will be up most of the time. Then we're going down 3 into Crushing Earth. Earth skills deal massively increased damage to CC'd enemies, and all enemies we hit are slowed, so this is always proc. 3 into Stone Guard, when you have Fortify over 50% of your max life, your Earth skills deal more damage. And then 1 into Safeguard, critical strikes with Earth skills fortify you for 2% of your base life. You only need 1 point of this. When you're in an AoE situation, this is going to just maximally fortify you almost instantly. When you're against single target, this mixed with your Grisly Rage is going to do all the fortify you need. Then 1 into Mending, so we can get 3 into Provocation. While you remain in Werebear for at least 16 seconds, your next non-defensive skill will overpower. So this is another one of our overpowers, and also this can cause our Trample to overpower as well. And if you're against a boss or a single target, this can actually deal decent damage, but you're going to want to try to keep an eye on it so you make sure you overpower with Pulverize. Then we have 3 in Defiance. Nature skills skills deal more damage to elites, 3 into natural disaster, so our earth skills deal more damage to vulnerable enemies, and 3 into circle of life, so anything that costs spirit will heal us for 3% of our max life. So anytime we pulverize, we're going to get a decent heal. This is pretty much how we're keeping ourselves topped off. Even though our build's super tanky, you still want some healing. And then next up, we have our spirit boons. We have wariness, take reduced damage from elites. We have sight talents for increased critical strike chance. We have calamity to extend the duration of our grisly rage. We have calm before the storm, another lucky hit where our nature skills have a 10% chance to reduce the cooldown of our ultimate, so we can stay in grisly rage at all times. And then obsidian slam, every 20th kill will cause your next earth skill to overpower, so another guaranteed overpower. And this is ridiculously strong in AoE situations, because in AoE situations, this will be what gives us the most overpowers. And then mixed with all of our other overpowers, we'll have a lot of overpower against single targets as well. And then next up, we have our Vampiric Powers, starting off with Anticipation. Your ultimate skill gains 20% cooldown reduction. This, mixed with everything else, we should be able to stay in Grisly Rage 100% of the time. Prey on the Weak, you deal more damage to vulnerable enemies, so just a pretty big damage increase. Then a Cursed Touch, a lucky hit up to a 44% chance to inflict Vampire Curse on enemies, and it has a chance to spread. And this mixed with Prey on the Weak means we'll be applying vulnerable curse to most enemies, and then they'll be vulnerable, and then we'll be doing more damage to them. And then we have Ravenous, another lucky hit, up to a 20% chance to increase your attack speed by 40% of your movement speed. This is currently at 46%. It can get a little bit faster with this build, but that's pretty much all the attack speed we need, because you really don't have enough spirit to spam out Pulverize any faster than that anyway. Then finally, Blood Boil. When your core skills overpower, you spawn 3 orbs that can do a little bit of damage. The damage is basically meaningless. The main thing we want on this is every 20 seconds your next skill is guaranteed to overpower as well. And again, be careful because this is any skill, so Trample can also use this, but this is just another way for us to have guaranteed overpowers. Now, I still need to do some testing on how all of these different overpowers work, because it doesn't seem like they overlap, so it doesn't seem like if you pulverize once, it'll just use all of them up, but I'm not sure if there's any other effects that'll cause that to happen. So there may be a better vampiric power than this, because we're only using it as another guaranteed way to overpower. And then next up, we have our Paragon Boards. We're primarily going to be going over the board and glyph selection, but I'll have a build planner linked in the description if you want to follow along with every single point. Now, even though I think these Paragon Boards are pretty decent, they're still a work in progress because I don't have a lot of glyphs specifically for this build leveled up a ton. So this build's going to get much stronger as I continue to level up my glyphs, and I might change it around pretty significantly depending on what I need when my glyphs are much more leveled up. So I have multiple glyphs in here that aren't even level 15 yet. And that starts off with the Werebear glyph. Increased damage while in Werebear, damage reduction while in Werebear. This is a very low level glyph. So just leveling this up, I'm going to get, I think, like 70 or 80% damage increase while in Werebear, which is at all times. So that's going to be pretty massive. Then we're going up, we're taking the Ancestral Guidance board. After spending 75 spirit, you deal 30% increased damage, which is going to be massive and active most of the time. The glyph we're taking is Dominate, increase overpower damage, and when you overpower an enemy, they take increased damage from you. Now again, this glyph is not high level, it's not even 15 yet. This is going to be, I think, over 200% increase overpower damage, so we'll be getting a massive damage increase from this as well. Then we're going over to the right, we're taking the Earthern Devastation board. Your skills deal increased critical strike damage, and this is increased by your damage versus crowd controlled. Mine's currently at 19%, that's still a good amount, but I need a damage versus crowd controlled roll on my weapon to get a lot more damage bonus from this. And the glyph we're taking is Earth and Sky, which increases the magic nodes within range, and then nature skills deal increased damage to crowd controlled or vulnerable enemies. One of the big reasons I'm taking this here is for more resistances. This gives a pretty big increase to all resist to make sure we can get all of our resistances much more easily. Also a pretty big increase to critical strike damage with Earth skills, but another reason you take glyphs like this is to get the dexterity or intelligence nodes to be able to get the secondary effect of all the rare nodes throughout the boards. Then we're going back over, we're going up, we're taking the Survival Instinct board, which while in Werebear form, you deal increased damage up to 50% for every 1% difference in current life percent between you and your enemy. So as enemies get lower health and you stay high health, you'll be doing more and more damage. And the glyph we're taking is Tectonic. Massively increased critical strike damage with Earth skills, but this is super important because it gives a 15% increase to lucky hit chance, and one of our biggest damage portions of this build is critting and overpowering, and we get guaranteed crits from our capstone, which is a lucky hit. We have a lot of lucky hit in this build, so this secondary effect is actually one of the strongest for druids. Then finally, we're going over to the left, we're taking the Constricting Tendrils board. We're only doing this for the glyph, and we're using the Undaunted glyph. Increased damage will fortify fortified and damage reduction while fortified, those buffs are just always going to be active. So that brings us to our gems and our legendary aspects. On your weapons, you want overpowered damage. On your gear, you want increased max life. And then on your jewelry, you want to make sure you have all capped out resistances. So as you can see on my jewelry, I have a fire resistance gem, I have a cold resistance gem, and then I have a resist to all gem to cap all of these out. Now, if you already have capped resistances, you just want to use armor gems here. Now, as I mentioned, we're using 3 unique items, so that means 3 legendary aspects we're not going to be using. And because we are using a unique amulet, we have to use a one-hander and offhand. A lot of Pulverize builds you'll see with a two-hander, so you can use this aspect where your Pulverize creates a shockwave, dealing up to 100% of its damage to all targets in its path, making Pulverize a massive AoE ability. Usually, Pulverize builds will have a two-hander because this can go up to 200%, making that big Pulverize wave do a lot more damage, but we have to use a one-hander and an offhand. I think that's actually going to be better in the long run. So any of the offensive aspects we go over can go on our rings, our main hand or offhand, or our gloves. And as we went over, the most important aspect is this Pulverize shockwave. Now this also changes up how Pulverize works. So Pulverize is still going to be casting the normal Pulverize. It's just an AoE around you basically. You slam in front of you, makes a small AoE, but then it's also going to have the massive shockwave that hits the whole screen. But if you get in the correct distance, both the normal Pulverize and the shockwave will hit a singular target. So you want to get into the correct range and learn which range that actually is. Then we have Pulverize is now an Earth skill, and after you cast Pulverize, it creates a small AoE on the ground. This is primarily so Pulverize is an Earth skill to get a ton of additional scaling. Then we're using Restore up to 4 of your primary resource when you crowd control an enemy. This is one of the most important aspects to get a good roll on, and I don't have a good roll on it. I have a mid roll, but this is going to be one of the main ways you get a massive amount of resource back in AoE situations. Then we have increase the duration of Grisly Rage by up to 5 seconds, and when you critical strike in Grisly Rage, you get increased critical strike damage up to 200%, so just another big damage increase for Grisly Rage. Then finally, your core skills deal up to 40% increased multiplicative damage based on your fortify, so this is going to be maxed out basically all of the time. Then on our legs, you're going to want Disobedience, percent increased stacking armor, and with us being in Werebear all the time and having the Insatiable Fury chest piece that has a percent total armor in Werebear roll, that amount of armor mixed with Disobedience in Werebear, you'll be able to get up to 100% armor, meaning you're capped on physical damage resistance, meaning with that and resistances with our other defensive like Earthen Bulwark and Debilitating Roar, this is a very tanky build. And then finally on our boots, you want damage from Earth skills slow enemies by up to 50% for 5 seconds. This roll does not matter. You just want enemies being slowed to proc a ton of additional effects throughout this build. And then we have our gear stats. Now what's also somewhat nice with this build is you're using 3 uniques. So that's 3 items you don't have to worry about gear stat rolls with, but my gear actually isn't the best. I actually got really unlucky with rerolling. I spent like 100 million gold on rerolling and didn't get what I wanted. So on your gloves, you want critical strike chance, lucky hit chance, overpower damage, and then you also want ranks to Pulverize. That's what I couldn't get. This item is at like 8 million per roll right now, so I just got super unlucky with the rolling. Then on your legs, you just want all damage reduction from injured, from fortified, from close, or a dodge chance versus close or versus distant enemies. Then on your boots, move speed, damage reduction while injured, a dodge chance roll, and a spear cost reduction. Then on your weapon, willpower, core skill, any critical strike damage roll, all stats roll is also pretty good, or damage to slowed. I actually don't have the best weapon. The only reason I have this weapon with suboptimal affixes is because it's a 925, so it's going to have really good base damage. Then on your offhand, you want critical strike chance, lucky hit chance, cooldown reduction, and then the last roll you would usually want cost reduction, but any damage reduction would also be good. So damage reduction while fortified, also really good. Being more tanky is always better. And then on your rings, you want max life, lucky hit chance, critical strike chance, and overpower damage. And if you can't get one of those, any other like critical strike damage roll or damage versus slow is also going to be good, or vulnerable damage. But you primarily want that crit chance, that lucky hit chance, that max life, and that overpower. Overpower is actually going to be very good because it can roll really high. So if you get really good rolls on your rings, you can actually get over 120% 30% more overpowered damage, which is pretty massive. But that's the entirety of this build. Now keep in mind, Pulverize Druids still aren't the best at going up against bosses, so if you're trying to defeat all the endgame bosses, it's gonna be a bit slower, but this is still one of the fastest clearing builds in the entirety of this game. You'll see from the footage and from other Pulverized Druids that you can basically one-shot the entirety of screens, even at very high nightmare dungeons. But that's all I want to go over, so thanks for watching.